When it rains, it pours. Well, the phrase could not be any truer. When the El Nino rains fall, and so everybody suffers. So tonight we want to speak to you about disaster management with a focus on El Nino rains. From the slum to the estates, businesses, big and small, schools, places of work, farms, they all bear the brunt of Mother Nature. Now, from school-going children to teachers, farmers, men and women alike, livestock, wildlife, none is spared. Floods, landslides and potholes that cause gruesome road accidents, sewage spillage that cause gruesome road accidents, sewage spillage that cause a spike in waterborne diseases and others like malaria. While the impact is usually devastating, so when the weatherman rings the alarm bells of a possible El Nino rains, everyone agrees we should be prepared. So, are we sufficiently prepared for this year's El Nino rains? Well, this is the scorecard. Welcome to the conversation. My name is Marie Yambo. And of course, this is the scorecard. My colleague O'Brien Kimani is not with us tonight. He's a little bit under the weather and we wish him well. So we hope that we'll have him in the show or on the show next week. So thank you once again for making the time to be with us. And as usual, our able panelists are here and they will be dissecting this particular conversation. And that is disaster management with a focus on the impending El Nino rains. And I want to start by introducing Dr. Richard Muita. He is the Acting Deputy Director, Climate Services, Kenya Meteorological Department. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mari.
Asante sana. So, Pius Masai Mwachi. He's not really a new face to Kenyans. He is a disaster management expert, former acting director, that is National Disaster Management Kenya, and also a senior police officer retired. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and our regular analyst, that is Professor Fred Ogola, who is a governance expert. Karibu.
Asante sana.
And Whitney Michedi, a political economist and columnist. Thank you so much for coming in, Whitney.
Thank you, Marie, and I'm delighted to be here.
Asante sana. And once again, thank you back at home for making the time for us tonight. And as you can see behind me, we're talking about disaster management with a focus on El Nino rain. So just before we delve into the conversation, Dr. Muita, and this is a question I'll ask to all of you. You've seen some of the footage that we were running at the beginning of the program. So that was in 1997. What can you remember about the 1997 El Nino rains?
Thank you, Mari. I guess I should be asking you that question because I was the one who actually gave out the projections for the 1997/1998 El Nino related linked rains. And what we remember observing, because we also record, or in simple terms, we measure in terms of the amounts of rainfall received, the magnitude, and possibly the intensities. So in 1997/1998 El Nino, it was one of the most significant El Nino in the history of El Ninos, because since 1900 we have had about 30 El Nino events. However, the 1997 was quite strong. It could only be compared to the 1982-83 and the 2015-2016. The only difference is that the 1982-1983 was not significant because of factors I can explain in another forum, and also the 2015-2016. But actually the water was huge. And I also remember that the impacts were equally quite significant across the whole country, and not only in Kenya, but it's remembered across the whole globe. It was quite significant.
Okay. Pius Mwachi, what do you remember about the 1997 El Nino rains?
Actually, the El Nino of 1997, it was an eye-opener. It was real El Nino. I remember that was the time I was serving in peace support operations in the Balkans in Croatia before I went to Bosnia-Herzegovina. And actually, it was a heavy downfall, whereby at that time I came here in Kenya for leave and I could not go out. I just stayed indoor because the rains was too heavy. I was time in Mombasa and also I flew over and I saw a lot of water down on the ground. So many people were affected. And that time, actually, we had not learned a lot of lessons because there is still no more planning and many people were affected. I remember there were some deaths. I cannot give the actual deaths, but people died. A lot of property wasted, including animals, and even buildings were affected. So it was real. Yes.
Okay. Professor Ogola?
Yes, thank you very much, Mariambo, and our viewers. And I can concur with my colleagues here that 1997, where was I? 1997, I was a Form 2 student in St. Mary's Yala. And St. Mary's Yala being a little bit on the hill, we didn't worry too much about it, and we used to come out of the school. Actually, for us, we had a lot of water because we had like a harvesting system. And in fact, I kept wondering, when rainfall is coming, why should you be prepared as if it's a disaster? Yet, we also cry when there's no rainfall. Is the preparedness on how to deal with the rain or actually how to take advantage? When you see rainfall as a problem, and some parts of the world are praying that they should have rain, and also we have really prayed in this country to have rainfall. I was in Taita Taveta the other day. They have never seen rain for 6 seasons. And now we are crying that rainfall is coming. So, Director, I'm sure we want to know really in this scorecard, why should we see rain as a threat when some people should see it as a blessing? I grew up knowing that when it rains, it's a blessing. So 1997, I saw we had a lot of rainfall. We had so much water. And, you know, our students' body, that was almost 600 students, it was something to celebrate, not something to cry about. But nevertheless, I can't estimate that you cannot live in Ireland. My family was living in Mombasa. Some of them were living in places. We are just hearing El Nino as a story in school. Remember, there was no much technology to see so much so fast. I'm sure that technology will also help the issue of experiencing this El Nino, because you can see in the phone, we could not watch radio. No, we could not listen to radio. You couldn't watch television. You can't read a newspaper. We could just be told by the teachers in the assembly, so we couldn't experience much if you are in a boarding school. But nevertheless, I heard these stories later when I traveled to Mombasa, when I listened to people trying to say many stories. But have we improved our drainage system? Because before, drainage system was bad. So those are the main questions I'm trying to ask myself.
Those are the issues we'll be delving into in our conversation. And last but not least is Whitney. I am really wondering if you can really remember anything about the 1997 El Nino rains.
Thank you, Marie, and a good evening to your viewers. In 1997, I was a couple of months old, so of course I have no recollection of what happened. But of course, it's very important for a generation to read about history, so we're doomed not to repeat it. When I read my history about the El Nino rains in 1997 and 1998, I saw that Kenya experienced losses of 1 trillion. We lost lives. A lot of infrastructure was damaged. A lot of buildings also came down, be it the roads, and also we see that livelihoods and also livestock, so many things were affected. But I do believe that it was because of probably lack of preparedness. Maybe they did not have enough mitigation measures in place at that time. So of course I just read it. I just read it as one of the catastrophic events that happened in Kenya way back. But yes, I think Kenyans have learned many lessons from the 1997-1998 El Nino rains. Thank you.
Indeed, many lessons learned, and we'll be getting to understand whether lessons were learned and if they were put into practice. So that is later on in this particular show. So let's start off with Dr. Richard Mwita. And just to bring us up to speed, you know, we've been hearing about El Nino rains. I mean, unless you're living under a rock, by now a lot of Kenyans, you know, have heard about El Nino rains. But just give us the definition, scientific definition of what is El Nino.
Well, El Nino is a very popular terminology these days, and not only now, but even before, since the 1997/1998 El Nino rains. The El Nino is simply a weather phenomena which actually occurs in the Pacific, specifically in the Central and the Eastern Pacific. That is the Pacific Ocean. And it's associated with two phases, which emanates from something we call ENSO, that is the El Nino Southern Oscillation. The El Nino Southern Oscillation is characterized by a warm phase where the sea surface temperatures of the Central and the Pacific, the Central and the Eastern Pacific warm up. That is, they increase, and hence they cause large mass of water to sort of, rise up, and that in effect causes changes in the rainfall patterns across the globe. The opposite, which is called El Nino, is called La Nina, sorry, is now associated with the reverse, the cooling of the sea surface temperatures over the same area, whereby because of the cooling, now the rising of the waters that was there when there was a warming that defined the El Nino, then causes the water to rise on the other side, that is the Western Pacific. So in essence, during a warm phase, that is the El Nino, like now what we are anticipating, is that the warm waters will actually kind of rise and cause a circulation, which causes rains in some parts of the world, such as the East African region, some parts of Indonesia, some parts of Southern America, and less of the same, less of the rains in Northern America, in parts of Eastern Australia, where you get very dry conditions, which sometimes are characterized by very significant and very bad bushfires, which perhaps you have seen before. So that's basically what the El Nino ENSO phenomena is. However, it's important to note that it does not occur all the time. Okay. So it has a periodicity of about 3 to 7 years within which it can occur, and the intensity varies. It can either be weak, it can be moderate, it can be strong, or it can be very strong. Okay.
And you directly explained, I was just about to ask you that question, whether El Nino is just, about rains, but you've already explained it can be drought and, wildfires and all that. So depending on which part of the continent you are.
Which phase of the ENSO. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Then how do you predict El Nino, in the sense that how would you distinguish between El Nino and normal rainfall? Because, as the weather department, you're able to tell that we're going to have, unusual rainfall.
Normally within the Pacific Ocean, we have some areas which we call Nino 1, Nino 3.4, and so on. It's like specific sites within the Central and the Eastern Pacific. So we monitor the sea surface temperatures around that area. And when they become more positive, that index, when it becomes more positive, then we look forward to El Nino-like conditions. But when they are more negative or neutral, then we don't expect El Nino. And of course, in history, we can look at the years when we had those kind of, conditions. For example, when we had the worst drought in this country in recent years since 2016 to early 2023, actually that was the La Nina phase of the ENSO, whereby the index was negative, and hence defining La Nina, which is associated with drought conditions, especially in the Horn of Africa region, including East Africa and Kenya, and some parts of Western US, and some parts of even South Africa. So in essence, we monitor the sea surface temperatures around that area. But something important to mention is that El Nino does not the ENSO does not act alone. We also have other climate drivers. For instance, as I said earlier, the 2015-2016
yes.
El Nino year was quite strong. But why did we not feel it here in Kenya? It was because there was another driver called the Indian Ocean Dipole. When the Indian Ocean Dipole is very strong, it shows a positive, index, and there is a positive index from the ENSO side, that's El Nino. When they combine, now we normally have very enhanced kind of rainfall or precipitation, like what happened in 1997/1998.
So you've rightly mentioned 1997 was there, then there was 2015, 2016.
And also 1982, 1983.
Yes.
It was of the same kind of, threshold. However, because the other drivers were weak, so we did not feel much of the 1982, 1983 and the 2015, 2016.
This time around, we're expecting it to be
the
quite...
The Indian Ocean Dipole is showing very strong indication that it will contribute to the strengthening of the El Nino rains, and that's why we are coming out with a projection of likely or probable enhanced rains during this particular season.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the weather department the meteorological department has been giving alerts, to the government, the county government, then the population at large. Do you think the government has taken heed to these alerts?
Well, I may not be so privy to each and every government department or agency. However, what I know is that as a department, we disseminate and communicate this information to all government agencies, ministries, and other channels, including the media, of course, which is one of our biggest shareholders. And within the counties, we have the devolved system, where we also disseminate this information through our county directors of meteorological services. And therefore, they will do this even to the sub-county level and even to the ward levels. And in essence, we have some intermediaries who would also take this up, whom we may not have control. And therefore, it's my very humble submission that there is a big chance or a high chance that much of this information has been disseminated across, different levels by this time.
Yes, I just wanted to set the pace because that is going to be forming, the basis of our discussions, because it's one thing to know that El Nino is coming, understanding what it is, then there's the other thing about, preparing ourselves. And so that is where our experts in disaster management, that is Pius Masai Mwachi, from the 1997 El Nino rains, what were the lessons that were learned? Do you think those lessons have been put into practice?
Yeah, actually, I'll say there are so many lessons learned. And as you see right now, we still have some challenges. However, I acknowledge that I can say that the government has done some work. And when we say the government, start from the top down. And you realize that the government also gets power through the legal framework. And right now I know Kenya disaster law has not been passed by Parliament. But we have the national plans. And I always tell people, one of my quotes, that papers don't work, people work. Like what the government has done in terms of preparedness, at the top level, they have done their work. But who fails the government is people on the ground. What are they doing? Because as for me, I don't need to wait for the law. If the plans specifically tells people what the national government, county government, and even the stakeholders do. There are specific objectives in the national plans. And the weatherman, he says that there will be El Nino, and also other regional bodies, they have said so. Now, what should we do with the information? The way the government has done, I give it a lot of marks, because they have told the governors to do their work. But are they doing? People are doing things in reaction.
Okay.
Actually, if you go down on common mwananchi, they don't understand it. People are looking into the money. The problem with Kenyan people, they look into money, but not into what is supposed to be done by management, by objectives. So if they can put into consideration that they need to assess every county, it's unique. They have different challenges. Okay. And you know, Kenya is unique because even if we have El Nino, we shall not have many challenges in many of the areas because of the land formation. Okay. So we cannot have equal money, equal problems. They need to have to actualize their own contingency plans, which they have. If they don't have, they need to be there. But they say they have those plans. But actually, the Deputy President, I just say he has done a good work, but he needs to counter-check. Those budgets coming from county governments, are they realistic? Because people would want to use this opportunity to do other things. So
we will be getting to the issue of money and how it has been useless before, you know, not just for El Nino, but other disasters, you know, in the country. And I'll be coming back with Professor Fred Ogola and also with Misheni, who will be giving us their thoughts. As Pius has already said, he thinks like the national government is doing its best, but the people on the ground are failing the government. So we'll be coming back to continue with this particular conversation just after this break. Welcome back to the program. This is the Scorecard, and we're talking about disaster preparedness with a focus on the El Nino rains. And just before the break, we were having the conversation, and our guest, that is Pius Masai, who is a disaster management expert, to say that the national government is prepared, but the people on the ground are failing the government. But before we talk to our resident analyst, that is Professor Ogola, let's get to hear what the Deputy President, that is Rigathi Gachagua, said in as far as preparedness is concerned.
Information to the people of Kenya, those who are on high ground, those who are in areas that are prone to floods, there is adequate information to the people of Kenya so that everybody can get prepared to deal with the expected emergencies and challenges that may come with El Nino.
Well, there you have it, Professor Ogola, the Deputy President, saying that the people are aware or they're prepared. Do you agree with those sentiments?
Yeah, first of all, it's difficult to disagree with the Deputy President. But nevertheless, allow me, because I did my PhD in Spain, and my Spaniard will not allow me if I don't explain what El Nino means. Of course, you given the scientific way, but El Nino means a little boy in Spanish. La Nina means a little girl in Spanish. Okay. So what is this girl thing? I was just analyzing anything negative, because Spain has got the masculine and feminine. So whenever there's something very bad, it tends to be named after a man. So El Nino. La Nina is a good thing. For example, a table is a male or female. The door is a, you know what I mean? So normally things which are not very nice, they're given to men, even in French. The things which are very nice, they seem to be given to ladies. But that's a story for another day. So what I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to draw from here, like if you look, just to explain a little bit, was that this temperature thing, they talk about the issue of rising to a certain level that actually creates challenges. What I'm trying to say is your explanation is scientific. So we have a scientific cause to El Nino. Means it can be predictable. It can even be predicted before. Now even have artificial intelligence. And I'm sure where the weatherman sits, you can be able to tell this more years before. How comes our responses, according to BT President, are not scientific? Have you listened to that clip? That people who they know, those who know, who are low, who are up, that's not a scientific response. Because what is a scientific response to El Nino? When this water comes, water has a way it's dealt with. Water follows a path, isn't it? Can water be given a path to follow? Why should you be scared that El Nino is coming, that it should go up or down? And how high will El Nino go? In fact, if you talk about the issue of predicting, you can predict El Nino with a scientific precision by even knowing at what degrees or what rise in water it will be, isn't it? Because these are highly well predictable. If we know water will rise to this level, what will you do? You see, for example, those who live in South C, South B, they are always, they become dams, and they actually sometimes become a mini rivers, isn't it? Now, development, the planning, I'm an expert in city planning and urban policy. What is happening there? Like, for example, if you look at how this city is planned, it is destined to have problems, because even evacuating water is impossible. Even just evacuating people is impossible. Look at what happened, for example, the other time in Embakasi when 7,000 youth appeared for a GSU intake. Even to evacuate them became a military operation. So if evacuating people is hard, evacuating water is hard, what is the city planning and urban policy? Because, for example, if you say we learned something, senior, I disagree. 1997, 1998, when I was in class, in Form 2, Whitney says she was a few months old. Whitney is born, she's now analyzing how prepared we are not, isn't it? I'm trying to tell that there is nothing like being prepared here. The government needed to invest heavily on prevention. I've seen some few figures here you put for us across on how much money is being put. Yeah, but if we prevented it, we did not need to worry about it. Spain, where these words come from, El Nino, El Niña, are not problems of Africa only. They don't happen only in Kenya, isn't it? You have to say that, isn't it? Why are other countries this not an issue? It is an issue here because we are doing piecemeal. Then the last point about the issue, when you talk about the issue of money, money has a problem that I think Isaac Newton has to come and explain to us what's called
we will be getting into the issue of money. I want to give Whitney a chance, you know. I don't know, because I tend to think like civic education has been done on the ground, but sometimes people wait until the floods have come. You know, their houses are flooded. That's when they leave. So is it a failure, really, on the part of the government, or is just the people who are not heeding? Yeah.
Thank you, Marie. You say that information has been shared to the grassroots, but has it? I'm talking, okay, what I'm saying is, of course, we get comprehensive data from the Met Department. We also see probably like highlights on the news, but in terms of information being disseminated to the grassroots, to the communities, I do not think that everyone has been sensitized on that. Why do I say so? Because I do believe that once people are sensitized, they'll probably stop being less anxious. Because when we watch the news, or probably when we go down to the communities, we can see people are still very jittery. They're not very sure about the magnitude or the intensity of the rains that are going to come. And of course, the Met Department has said that probably it will not be as intense as the ones in 1997, 1998. When you also talk about disseminating information to the grassroots, I think what we really need to tell Kenyans, other than probably them being scared and fear-mongering from probably what they hear say or something like that, I think it's the point of never waste a crisis. I think the El Nino rains are coming, and I think this is an opportunity for Kenyans, especially when we're witnessing extreme weather patterns. We're from 4 decades-long drought in this country, Horn of Africa, to be more specific. So when we're saying it's been 4 long decades of drought, and right now we're going to experience enhanced rainfalls, I think it's the time to tell Kenyans that this is the time to plant. This is the time to probably capacity build the farmers. Of course, we know Kenya is an agrarian economy. This is the time to probably tell the farmer to probably even get the extension officers, who I do believe in the counties have been neglected, or they've gone into retirement and no one is really tapping into their wisdom. I think it's the time to probably sensitize those people so that they can come share with Kenyans information on or opportunities that are available in terms of the El Nino phenomenon. I do not think that this should be a big crisis, even though we're talking about evacuating Kenyans from the flood-prone areas, or evacuating them from places which are prone to landslides. I think this is the bigger opportunity, other than just looking at it as a threat, which probably it will not be. Yeah. But look at it as an opportunity, or as I've said, never waste a crisis, and look at the positives, and also just involve every stakeholder, because we see that this El Nino rains will really call for very many people to come on board, be it the counties. When we're talking about the national government, we're probably talking about the Ministry of Education. we're seeing that children are now going to be having their national examinations.
Exactly.
And Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture. As I've said, I must emphasize on this point of agriculture, because as I've said, agriculture employs so many Kenyans, and I think this is the time probably to even increase our acreage on irrigation because of the water, and also to just invest in harvesting water and water storage. So I do not think that we should just navel gaze of looking at it as a crisis, which probably
and maybe just to share with the viewers some of the numbers for the 1997-1998 El Nino rain. So this is what we were able to get. That is 178.2 billion shillings was lost in infrastructure. 100-kilometer roads destroyed. 2,000 schools were destroyed or submerged. 22.3 million animals died in the 1997-1998 El Nino rains. 77,000 people were displaced. 2,000 of them died. Schools were closed for several months, and there was rise in waterborne diseases, malaria and cholera included. And so maybe if I bring you in, Dr. Richard Mwita, what are some of those effects that, you know, apart from just what we've mentioned here, the different sectors, how are they likely to suffer?
Well, it's a matter of probability.
Yeah, and that's what bearing in mind that Whitney has just mentioned, we're going to be having the KCSE and the KCPE at the peak of this particular El Nino.
Yeah, I guess I'll combine the thoughts of all the panelists here, that we can view the El Nino linked rains to both negative and positive impacts.
Exactly.
In essence, it's not all doom. Why? As Prof said here, if we have mitigation measures in place, because this is not a new phenomenon, it's not something that has just been blown up today by the media. It is something that has been in the offing. If you clearly remember, since early this year, NOAA, that is the Northern Atlantic Oceanic Organization, indicated that we are seeing that we expect strong signals of El Nino this year. That was early in January, February, and coming into March. And even people started hyping about the El Nino thing so early in the year. Now, for us as meteorologists or as forecasters, we look at those indications from about June, July, and August, because we normally have a 3-monthly kind of running average, so that we use that one now to predict the next 3 months, which is October, November, and December. So in essence, we expect that while we project enhanced rains, which may lead to certain disasters, such as flooding, some areas may be prone to landslides, some areas may also be prone to even, you know, the rising levels of the lakes, like what we saw in 2020 for the Rift Valley lakes, where they may cover some areas which may displace people or may destroy crops. We may also see some areas which may also become uninhabitable. And also we may see a rise in diseases, which, for example, Rift Valley fever actually sprouts up during the El Nino rains. Like in 2006, there were so many cases and many livestock died, even some wild animals. So I guess that there are quite a number of other positive, not necessarily negative. For instance, I beg to ask the question, since she mentioned that we are an agrarian kind of economy, what stops us as a country, as a nation, to carve out some land? You know, Kenya comprises of about more than 80% of ASALs, the arid and semi-arid lands. And in essence, the ASALs are more fertile than some of the land, the areas we think are fertile, like Western Kenya, some parts of Rift Valley. Why? The soils are very fertile.
So then it's the issue of preparedness and
why don't we carve some part of the land and just specifically say we're expecting El Nino enhanced rains? We can tap this water and then irrigate the whole of the ASAL areas where we can plant and have a lot of food in surplus and even import some of the food.
Well, that's a challenge to
export some of the food.
Our leaders. And Pius, this is where I want to bring you in as a disaster management expert. And, the government says it needs about 10 billion shillings to be able to mitigate, the effects of this particular El Nino. And I'm just wondering, what other resources do they need? What will this money be doing?
Actually, we need to focus 80% on prevention, mitigation, and preparedness, and 20% on response and recovery. That's a good focus, rather than focusing a lot of money on response. And actually, this money, as I said before, should be taken care of. No one should use that money without a proper contingency plans approved. Because if that money needs to be spent, it should be spent within the plans by objectives, within their contingency plans. And every specific county, I know they have that contingency plans for El Nino specific. And they'll not just spend money without following the plans. And who need to supervise it is the governor. So the governors should ensure that there are people on the ground. They understand their responsibilities. It's not about sharing money. Money is budgeted for. That money that should not have resorted to use into what has been budgeted for should be returned back. It's not a matter of spending to finish. So what is important is every county is unique. They need to look at their contingency planning. If there are money that has been budgeted for assisting those communities, if you tell those communities that they need to shift, is now the duty of the governor and his administrators and everybody, and it should be a concern of every person to enlighten each and every other Kenyan. Because if you just say that this one, people living on the low level, some people know that on the low level, but they don't understand. It's like you are sick, you go in the hospital, unless you are told that you are sick, some people cannot know that they are sick. So what is important is the administrators, the chiefs, the church leaders, all divide, they should ensure that they support this. And even me and you, it's about all of us. Without putting everybody together and a concern of all of us will fail.
Yeah, you mentioned the issue of, how money should be used prudently and all that. And Professor Gola, I would like to bring you in here because there's a time, probably Dr. Richard Mwita will remind us when that was, that the Weather Department did predict there was going to be El Nino rains. It never really happened, at least not to that magnitude. And money was set aside, for use in the mitigation of El Nino rains then. But later on, it came out that the money was misused. Do you think there are enough safeguards, especially this time, to ensure that, those charged with manning this particular money do not actually embezzle it?
I can tell you, Mariambo, without a single doubt, that the biggest elephant in the room in Kenya is corruption. In fact, even Boma should be discussing only that. If they could just discuss that only, we'll solve our problem. Cost of living is corruption. Independence of IBC is corruption. You can have the most independent IBC, but someone will corrupt it. You can review the constitution, someone will corrupt it. Corruption is a big issue in this country, and that's why it begins with leadership. Are we electing leaders based on someone who has money? In fact, this is a problem of Kenya. I'm not even going to blame the leaders. If you want to elect someone who gives you more money, it means he must have stolen the money, therefore he becomes a leader for you. In fact, let me ask you, and this is something you have to put clearly, what we are finding here is that when you find a country where politicians are richer than businessmen, there's a problem. Okay. And the richest people in Kenya are politicians, not really businessmen. And how can we reverse this? Governors in their counties, they're the richest. Don't even blame the president. Even in the county, the governors are the richest. Look at how much money has been stolen in the county government. The president can disburse the money in counties even for this disaster management, but there's no accountability framework. There is the evolution was done, but there was a lot of hurry. They call it the Big Bang, where they boom once you drop. if you just drop 10 billion in Siaya, boom, nobody even knows how to use it. Do you know, if you receive something too much, too soon, it can kill you. So this money has been misused. If you walk to most of the counties, like for example, go to Mandera. When you walk in Mandera, ask yourself, has 10 billion been coming here in the last 10 years? You don't see that money. If you go to my counties here, the same thing. So according to me, the government needs to come up with a accountable mechanism upon which this money can be used and accountability. Now, you look at the figures you're reading there by telling us how many roads were damaged. Now, for me, I'm an economist. We don't like stories, we like numbers. Now, maybe our senior here can tell us, with the mitigation in place, if X number of kilometers were damaged, this time if there were 20 kilometers of roads damaged, if you tell us with what we have put in place, we can only damage 2 kilometers, I understand that. If you tell me 2,000 schools disappeared, this time tell me mitigation measures show that we won't lose 2,000 schools, we shall lose like at least 100. And then what will you do with the schools we are losing? Some people, after the flood, they go build in the very place where there are floods. City planning, urban policy, country planning, like about this, demarcating land and say these are agri-zones. Go to Spain, I was there. Okay. There are places where they say this is just for agriculture. And they have left for that means. When the government carries the project, for example, a hero irrigation scheme, people are saying you are taking our land. Where Tabere scheme was supposed to be only for rice, but now people are coming to start building. So there are so many things which are not happening there. But the question about education, which was Whitney, if I just weigh in a little bit. Whitney, let me agree with you that if you ask any Kenyan to tell you exactly what they do when rainfall begins, someone says they'll run to where? Isn't it? Yeah. Now, there's no one who knows exactly what we'll do. There are some knowledge which are not helpful. When I tell you, those who are on the lower ground should rise up. If you don't have land up, where are you going? You know, if I tell you that you rise up, now, my brother, you will rise up to somebody's land. So, where is this which has been demarcated as El Nino evacuation camps? You understand? Okay. If they were demarcated, allocated, where is this fund going? In El Nino evacuation camps. If we have someone who can make this leadership decision, this country will go further.
So but what the issue of leadership?
I listened to Gachagua there, sorry to say, I listened to him. I still don't know exactly what I will do. If the deputy president can speak and we cannot tell exactly what we shall do, who can have better knowledge or information to give? So let us put our leaders to account and let us also ask the hard questions. I'm sure that Kenya is a place where people can engage and talk. Deputy president knows a lot of information. Remember, he was a DO. And being a DO, you have a lot of knowledge about society, how this happens. During those floods, he was a DO. He understands how this happened. I would allow him to say, there's a Nino camp in this area. When these things rise, go here. But for me, what I've talked about this construction of dikes, isn't it? Which you can do, where water can follow a certain path. You can even direct them to a certain dam. Those are there. What I'm concerned about most is that we have a scientific problem with no scientific solution. It should be as clear as that.
Fair enough.
I want just to add to what you said. We need to also make it clear here, people to understand that there is strategic leadership, operational and tactical. Now, like what the Deputy President has really just said, that's just a strategic direction. Now, actually the doers, as I said before, you know, the big leaders give directions.
So we seem to be having, and I say, a leadership issue there.
Yes. Okay. But they need to find it down and implement it. Yeah.
Now, Whitney, as a political economist, how do you think is going to be the impact, you know, of the El Nino rains after they've subsided? Because we've been told this is supposed to go on until, I think, Dr. Richard, until January. What do you think in your estimation?
Thank you, Marie. Let me just add my voice to what Prof was saying for a minute. I do believe that today I saw a report by the EACC, which is saying that, of course, we know in times of emergencies and disasters, some ministries, departments and agencies, and also some counties take advantage of this moment to flout procurement laws. They circumvent the law, and also they just go right ahead and, of course, embezzle funds under the guise of, they've procured this under emergency circumstances. So I think the single threat of Kenya is impunity, where we're seeing people are already embezzling funds meant for El Nino emergency, and probably there'll be no accountability which will be meted on this. Like, there'll be no accountability, or there won't be any prosecutions or convictions. So I think probably the EACC need to look into that more.
So just to say, there'll be El Nino billionaires, just like we had the COVID billionaires. Yes.
Okay, so we want to bring this conversation to a close. We are just about winding up, but remember, we did also ask you a question today, and that how prepared are you for the El Nino rains? I'll be able to sample one or two of your reactions. But Dr. Mwita, it's our tradition here that we do rate the government's performance, in terms of, in this particular discussion on the preparedness of El Nino rains. So maybe the question I want to ask you is, how do you rate government's response to the El Nino, threats out of 5?
Well, based on what I've read from the media, and also based on previous experiences, I would say that I would give the government a 2 out of 5. This is my personal opinion.
Okay.
Based on the fact that much of the information that should go into preparedness is provided much earlier on. And of course, it's also in the minds of people that we had a similar event in the past. Like in 1939 to 46, we had 6 million people died around the East African region.
So you're giving them a 2 out of 5?
Yeah, 2 out of 5.
Prof?
I'll give them a 1 because they say that 80% of the things that you go through is how you react to things. 20% is about what happens to you. So El Nino will happen, will contribute only 2% to our problems, 20%, but 80% will be contributed by how we react. With the lack of knowledge, we shall react very badly,
so
and we shall suffer more. 1 out of 5.
Wow. Pius?
Yeah, actually, I'll just move slightly a bit from my colleagues. I appreciate their consideration. Given a scale of 0 to 5, I'll give them a 3. But I'll caution the government that let them not release that money. Money should be released by objectives.
Okay.
Because there's what you call prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. If you release just all the money like this, that money will go. So what's the best practice is money should be released by objectives.
Whitney, how do you rate the government's response to the El Nino flood?
Thank you, Marie. I'd probably give it a 2. I think for probably the national government, I concur that I think they're putting in some measures, but for the counties, I do believe that other than launching probably their strategic plans or something like that, there's nothing much going on in the grassroots. The communities are still not sensitized enough. I think the biggest thing we should be watching out for, or the county governments should be very focused on, is not livelihoods or probably the infrastructure, but I think the biggest thing for Kenya, the biggest test will be that no Kenyan loses their lives because of the El Nino phenomenon.
Okay, so you're giving them a 2 on that. So the second question, Dr. Mwita, how do you rate the public awareness on El Nino?
Out of 5, I would say that I would give it a 4 because I'm cognizant of some areas which still have challenges in terms of communication, like some of the ASAL areas where people do not have access to, say, radio, to newspaper, or even to social media platforms.
Okay, Prof.
According to me, I would give these people just 1. In fact, the 1 is the lowest scale ever. So it's just like saying there's no lower you can go. Because you see, if you look at the people communicating, the coordination in government in giving this awareness also is a challenge. Not everything should be read by the president and deputy president. There are some things which need to be read by the experts. And I'm sure the deputy president is not an expert in this. Give experts and technocrats their role to play. Not that every other person in government, just because of seniority, will speak. I think that we need to start giving meritocracy a chance so that the people who know, who is able to tell people what to do during this time, is you.
Pius, how do you rate awareness on the El Nino?
Actually, I go with my colleagues, and the challenge down there, because me, I move all over, and through my PMAC International Consortium and CLOPSET and SPEDFAC Professional Humanitarian Initiatives. PMAC International is a consortium of professionals. CLOPSET and SPEDFAC, they are initiatives which deals with humanitarian and climate change.
So how do you rate public awareness?
How I rate it, public awareness is actually, that's where we score. There are two levels. The national government and county government.
Okay.
The national government have a 2, but county government have a 1. And I'm telling you, many people don't understand what is happening.
We will leave it there. Brittany, very first.
I do believe that there's not enough sensitization. People don't really understand the socio-economic impacts of the El Nino phenomenon. They probably just know the concept, but they don't understand what the impacts will be it how they can take advantage of it, as I said, the opportunities or the threats. So I think much more needs to be shared within the multi-stakeholders.
So you rate it at
1.
At 1. So thank you so much, Whitney, Pius, Professor Ugola, and also Dr. Richard Mwita for coming in and just, getting to enlighten us about, disaster management with a focus tonight on El Nino rains. So hope that back at home you've also been able to learn quite a lot, in terms of what El Nino means and how you should be prepared. And I'll just read 1 or 2 because my director is already telling me my time is up. So this is Keeping a Teach Quiet is saying, I have planted crops which are resistant to much rains and prepare terraces to drain away water, but as of now, hakuna dalili ya El Nino. So that is, we are waiting to see, because the meteorological department has assured us that in the second week of October, we'll start seeing the rains coming. So thank you again, once again, for joining us. My name is Maria Boyd. We hope to see you again next week.